The commoditisation of education is a pressing issue that has garnered significant attention in recent times. As higher education becomes increasingly commercialised, it raises important questions about the value and accessibility of academic qualifications. This discussion delves into the core issues and impacts of this phenomenon. It is an issue that is being increasingly raised by politicians, when in opposition at least, and by students at the sharp end of its cost. However, the commoditisation of higher educational qualifications is discussed much more cautiously by academia. It is a narrow path to navigate between a vital source of funding that supports their own tenure and a degradation of the worth of the qualifications being awarded. Recent decades have seen an ever-increasing need for higher educational revenue to be sourced directly from students. This has had the unintended consequence of threatening the quality of the education provided and, by extension, the well-being of the societies that depend upon this knowledge transfer. In most economies, access to higher education is a cost center for the recipient to a greater or lesser extent. This works fine as long as the recipient's degree is of benefit to them and ideally also to wider society. In the UK, student debt now stands on average around £48,370 for those graduating in the 2023 to 2024 academic year, according to the worldwide web.gov.uk website. When acquiring higher education qualifications become this expensive, generating huge revenue streams that the sector now depends upon, distortions and conflicts of interest can arise. The incentive to grow student numbers is ever present, and this leads higher education degrees to become transactional. Not only does the customer expect a degree after paying for it, they expect to choose very specific subjects of study, which may or may not deliver any skills benefit. There is now pressure on colleges and universities to provide whatever qualifications are popular in any given year in order to generate revenue, and to do so in competition with other institutions. This now introduces an element of fast fashion to a commoditized educational system. Will this plethora of college degrees, particularly those in social science that now accompany so many adults on their life's journey, actually deliver career benefit for the individual or a collective societal growth? We are all units of productivity, whether we like to think about it or not. Collectively, our output and its value determine whether our societies thrive or fail. Some of us are lucky enough to do the job we always dreamed of, others acquire wealth, but many others have neither. Part of the compact that makes these different personal situations bearable for any person is that the wider societal and economic structure supports as well as benefits from their contribution. If a social economic system operating at societal level becomes divorced from that society in pursuit of profit or the interests of a specific client group, then that construct is likely approaching its end game. When a society's educational resources become subverted into a cash cow for the here and now, instead of an investment for the future, then that is a clear indication of such a broken societal system. The need for advanced economies to import skilled migrants in order to sustain their gross domestic product is not feasible in all but the short term. There are not enough skilled migrants to go around, and this denudes developing countries of their own skilled labor anyway. This itself is collateral damage caused by overexploitation of education in developed economies for speculative wealth creation instead of for investment in the future. Looking beyond education, when your rivers are full of poo and your streets are full of homeless people, then your societal system is either broken or at the very least in crisis. The point here is simply that late-stage capitalism is no longer supporting the growth of society as it once did, and in particular that commoditized education no longer delivers the knowledge and skills that a society needs in order to maintain its stability. The truism that capitalism is the least bad option available to us is only true for as long as it is true. Put in a less obtuse way, all societal systems have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Prior to global free market capitalism, we had mercantilism as the eminent social economic system of the day, and prior to that there was feudalism. There are no fixed dates as to where one system starts and another stops, and this would have happened at different times in different places as well. By the early 20th century, the continuation of mercantile empires had reached its limit, leaving industrialized and militarized economies glowering at one another from behind the protection of their various colonial empires and trading blocs. From this vantage point, the destructive reset of the world order by the First and Second World Wars, with a global depression sandwiched between them, seemed to have been all but inevitable. It was clear that mercantilism was not a viable option for the world's ruined economy after World War II. The United States of America was the only intact remaining economic power and now possessed around 2/3 of the world's gold bullion supply. In 1944, our current world economic system began with the Bretton Woods Agreement. This would establish an international monetary policy that saw all major currencies pegged to the US dollar at a fixed rate, while the US dollar itself was now the only significant currency to remain on a gold standard. Any country's central bank could convert its US dollars into gold if it so wished, but not its own currency. This essentially created a global US dollar reserve currency. This period in our global free market capitalist system saw huge amounts of capital investment flow out from the United States of America to rebuild much of the world's shattered infrastructure and economy after World War II. This was not charity, as the repayments from such loans flowed back to the investor. This was after they had rebuilt economies that the United States of America could then export consumer goods to. The institutions created by the Bretton Woods system for international monetary loans, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund also require conditionality. This is code for the requirement for recipient countries to open up their internal markets to foreign investment and privatization, serving to break open the closed mercantile markets of many countries. In 1971, President Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollars to gold at a fixed value, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. This marked the beginning of the fiat currency era, where the value of money is not based on physical commodities, but rather the trust and credit of the economy. The end of the gold standard reshaped the global financial landscape, leading to more flexible exchange rates and the rise of new economic policies and practices. The amount of gold reserves held by the United States of America could no longer match the amount of money required to pay for its trade deficit, along with its increased military expenditure during the Cold War. When the United States dollar became a fiat currency instead of a commodity currency, it could no longer be exchanged by foreign central banks for gold. Despite this, the dollar remained the global reserve currency. This period of global free market capitalism saw a huge increase in the money supply, as the amount of dollar reserve currency that could be created was not limited by gold bullion, and the global free market capitalist economy had a huge appetite for United States dollars in order to trade in commodities. Despite oil shocks and the tensions of the Cold War, during the period from 1971 to the present, there has been a huge increase in global trade and wealth, fueled by easier access to more finance. This has been supported by the deregulation of the financial industry, the growth of globalized trade, and much easier access to credit for business and consumers. The removal of a gold standard limit to the amount of reserve currency created more money for investment in wealth creation, and the deregulation of finance and other industries removed restrictions on how this money could be invested to create wealth. It is important to understand the difference between wealth and money at this stage. Money is just an instrument for the transfer of wealth. Money is not wealth itself, which instead is tied to assets like land, capital, and labor. Money is an instrument for transferring such wealth from one asset, place, or person to another. Deregulation or unleashing the power of the free market allowed wealth to be created and, by extension, extracted from all manner of activity within the public realm. A significant attraction of deregulation for developed economies is to allow public cost centers to be spun off to the private sector. Here they can then be commoditized or their assets stripped to generate wealth for private enterprise. The short-term attraction of this to the state is that it removes budget cost while maintaining the appearance of a public service being maintained, but as a private or semi-private enterprise in accordance with market forces. This attempt to run the mechanism of society as a profit-generating business can be dangerously reductive. Societies and their public realm are not businesses. They provide the platform, protection, and ecosystem within which business can operate. When you deconstruct the public realm to reduce costs, the danger is not only that society is damaged, but that this damage can harm the ability of the private sector to flourish. An analogy would be stripping the lid from the roof of your own house and selling it for cash. In the short term, you make money, but this is at the expense of your own home's future viability. Whether or not we are looking toward the end of late-stage capitalism, or at least a sharp reset for its current global free market variant, what is undeniable is that the current economic model is very different from that of the Bretton Woods system. It is increasingly mercantile, but with a very important difference. As global free market capitalism exerts a mercantile approach in its exploitation of profit at the expense of society, it does so without the guardrails of state policy and interstate relations to impede it. Classic mercantilism worked with the state and was sometimes implemented by the state. This modern global free market capitalist version of mercantilism is implemented by wealth independently of the state and sometimes against the state. The primary goal is to extract wealth from not only the workforce and foreign markets but also from society by hollowing out state infrastructure. Utilities must first be privatized, then loaded with debt, and wherever possible commoditized. This leads to increased consumer costs, reduced market choice, and reduced quality of services. It also delivers huge shareholder profit in a deregulated market. The state is reduced to being a bystander to the decline of its society's quality of life. The end of late-stage capitalism will not be the end of the world, or even of civilization. Such social economic systems have ended before, but they do so with varying degrees of disruption. The disruption of the world order is often a consequence of systemic failures and geopolitical shifts. These disruptions can lead to significant changes in power dynamics and societal structures. The end of feudalism was followed by the Reformation and the 30 Years' War. In retrospect, the world's global socio-economic system recovered from the Second World War remarkably efficiently. This said, the disruption caused during this period was immense, and if you were living in Hiroshima in 1945, it probably seemed very much like the end of civilization. Ultimately, the degree of disruption that will be faced by the end of late-stage capitalism and a consequent move to a new unknown world order will be partly determined by the degree to which the current global system deviates from supporting wider society to exploiting and harming it.